Hi, this is Joel Shinnis. Yes, that Joel Shinnis on YouTube, and I'm going to continue my series on React state management, kind of a comparative React state management. Then in the last video, I just used stuff that was native to React and used the container pattern just to separate my state management from my presentation. Today, I'm going to actually use a library for this, and I'm going to use Redux. So I feel that it's a little better to introduce Redux once you've actually already introduced state management. And so let me start with, um, yeah. So now that I've already started with some state management, let me kind of show how Redux works as a mechanism. So Redux is based on the Flux pattern. And there are a few different Flux implementations out there. And it's pretty simple. You have a store, which is your state management app, and you have your view, your presentation layer. And what happens is that the store has a state which it kind of passes down to the view as info. The view, there's also a dispatcher in the store, and the view basically sends an action to that dispatcher. It basically tells the store to dispatch an action. The dispatch makes changes to state. Oh, and while it's going, it's also going to talk to external APIs. So it's going to be able to perform side effects at that point as well. In Redux, we have the exact same, it's the exact same thing from the outside. It's just there's very specific about the way it works on the inside. And the way it works on the inside is this. You have the view passes an action to the dispatch, and then that passes through some middleware. It can pass through some middleware. That middleware is able to talk to APIs, trigger side effects, that sort of thing. And if it gets through the middleware, the action will kind of go to a reducer, and the reducer is the engine of state. It is the the reducer is the thing that determines how state will change in response to actions, and it creates a change to state, perhaps, and then as passed to the view. So here's the reducer is a pretty simple signature. It's just current state plus action equals new state. That should say new state. I'm just realizing. Oh, well, we'll fix it in post. We won't actually fix it. But it should be new state. An action is just, for the most part, just an object. And it has some sort of type, usually an uppercase string, which was kind of how you did constants in C back in the day. And then also it may have some value, some payload along with it. But it doesn't have to. So sometimes just having a type is enough. Yeah. And these actions are represent like the smallest bits of state, bits of a change to state. So, and I want to speak briefly about middleware because it's going to kind of come up in a bit. The way middleware works is that, again, it sits between the dispatch and the reducer. When dispatch gets an action, it passes it into the middleware. And the middleware might just pass it on to the reducer. And in fact, if it doesn't pass it on to the reducer, it never causes a change to state. But the middleware also then has a chance to, based on that, talk to some APIs. And based on those, a middleware, there's no reason it can't also create new actions and pass those into the dispatch to be kind of processed again. So yeah, we'll be writing a bit with middleware. And I want to kind of talk briefly about React Redux. So the idea is there's a store, and the store kind of talks to APIs. And then there's your React app, right? And what happens is that the React Redux has this provider, which that's what creates the connection to the store, and it kind of wraps around your app. And then within your app, you may take a component and wrap it with Connect. And Connect basically creates a version of your presenter that's connected up to the store. So you'll be able to create a bunch of connections as you go. Basically create a bunch of components that are de facto connected to the Redux store. And those will actually be what pass the action up as well. They'll have access to the dispatch of the store, And so you'll be able to pass actions with these connected components. All right, so let's go. All right, I have my component or my container pattern from last time. I'm going to fork it, and I'm going to create a new folder called Redux app. Right. Um, I want to start with kind of just some of the most basic things I can do here, which will be setting up an initial state and then connecting it to my app. So let me do that. I'm going to call this reducer.js. Um, and I have this every now and then. Okay, reducer.js. In fact, I'm going to hide the browser for a second, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to describe an initial state. I am going to make exportable. And our initial state, as we kind of covered, like I'm going to copy and paste this to-do list container. There we go. And I'm going to export function reducer. Now, this is going to take an state, which I'm going to default to initial state, and it's going to have a type. All right. Now, the usual boilerplate for a reducer is that I'm going to make. If you remember, the action had a type of some sort of key, of action type. I'm going to create that here. But yeah, so it's going to be switch action.type. I don't really have any types I've created yet. So I'm just going to create the default, which is return state. So this is a pretty dumb reducer. It's basically just action. It's the most basic version that we can have. It's just going to take in state and return the initial state. That's it. And I'm going to go to project info here. I am going to make a new to-do list container, redux.jsx. I'm going to have to do a little more setup here. So into my dependencies, I'm going to add React Redux and Redux. Yeah, and right, so there it is. Boom, here's my reducer. In my index.js, this is where I'm going to create my Redux store. So I'm going to say that I'm going to import create store from Redux and const store. Well, in order to create a store, I actually need to get the reducer. So import reducer from reducer. There we go. Cool, cool, cool. And then I'm going to say const store equals create store reducer. I'm going to bring in the provider. So the React Redux gives us just two things, really. The provider component and the connect higher order component. So I'm going to bring this in, and I'm going to say provider store is store. Cool, cool. I'm also going to just kind of zoom in a bit. All right, so I'm going to say, instead of grabbing this from to-do list container hooks, grab it from to-do list container Redux. And then here I'm going to, import. Actually, I don't know that I'm going to import React. I'm definitely going to import um, to-do list presenter from to-do list presenter.jsx. And if I just return, not return, if I export default, well, let me actually do the job of wrapping it. So the to-do list presenter, it is waiting to accept tasks, loading, and adding count. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import something from React Redux. This is the connect higher order component. If we look at our diagram here, we already have the provider around the app. And then within the app, we're going to have we're going to use connect to connect a presenter. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to import or export default. Connect to-do list presenter. Now, it may seem strange that I'm calling the function and then calling it again. We're going to put some stuff in here. But now that I have this, if I go to to-do list container Redux and show my browser, we'll transpile, and yeah, it cannot read property map if undefined. So it is presenting it, but it just doesn't have tasks yet. So it has no data to act on. So I'm going to go ahead and give it data to act on. When you do this connect, you make two functions, map state to props, takes in state and is going to return an object, and function map dispatch to props will also return an object. And we'll get to what these do, but for this one, if we look at the presenter, it is expecting tasks, loading, and adding count. This is going to get from the state. So let me go back here and say that I'm going to return tasks, loading, state.loading, and adding count, state.adding count. This function can be made a lot smaller using object destructuring. I will leave that as an exercise to the reader, but I will now pass map state to props there. And now in the browser, there is actual data for it to have. It has an empty array, it has loading tasks, it has adding count is 0. If I went back to reducer and did that, and this thing went up, you could see it has the adding count of 1. So I'm pretty much done with my presenter for now. Okay, one of the very, very cool things about Redux and this way of doing it is that the reducer is a pure function. It means it has no side effects, no randomness, always the same input given the same output, which means that it's really easy to make it do what it's supposed to do using test-driven development. So I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to go to the file editor here, Redux app. I'm going to make a new file here called redux app.test.js. I may make more of these, but I'll break them out as I need them. And I'm going to use Jest. Now, if you want to find out more about Jest, I recommend playing with it on your own, looking at a bunch of other things. I'm going to show it being used. And yeah, I think that's kind of a good way just to see it. So especially if you watch this and it doesn't make much sense, go use Jest and then come back to this, and it'll make more sense the second time around. And in fact, watching this first may make the training make more sense. So I'm going to describe the reducer. I'm going to, of course, import reducer from reducer. Cool, cool, cool. I'm going to describe kind of that. So we have that thing where we start out, we're loading, we don't have any tasks, and we want to get tasks. So basically, at some point, there is going to be a fetch tasks success action that's going to show up. And the way I'm going to describe that is it um, sets loading to false and sets the tasks. Now I'm going to say that it's going to have a tasks payload here to the incoming tasks. So right now I haven't really done much. I've just kind of described, hey, it's going to do this. If I look at my test runner here, we'll see that there's one test, none of them are failing, right? It's just pending. So what I'm going to need to make this work is a description of, I'm going to import from actions fetch tasks success. Now, none of this exists yet. You didn't miss a step. In fact, it's going to show me, hey, there's a problem. Cannot find module path actions. Yeah, fair enough. Good, good, good. I'm going to say actions.js. It's going to run this, and then it's going to say that nothing's failing. All right. So let me write. I'm going to bring in the initial state. That's kind of where I'm starting from, right? And I'm going to say const tasks equals an array with ID alpha 1, 2, 3, 4 Zulu, name first task. Oh, we have a failure already. Oh, I think it's just a syntax. Okay. Name first task, finished false, and then maybe another one of these. Bravo 1, 2, 3, 4 Yankee. Second task, finished. True. I think my code sandbox is kind of getting a little bit slow. Let me spin. Okay, let's take a moment. Actually reload. Okay, I'm going to just there we go. I think that'll help. For right now, I actually want my main view to be tests. I'm going to save that. I am going to open up. Oh, didn't want that. And apparently, that's going to happen each time. Source Redux app test. Okay, so I am going to const fetch tasks success action equals fetch tasks success tasks, which is good. Now it's saying that fetch task success is not a function. No, it's not, so that's correct. And I'm basically going to keep on coding a test until I have an error, and then I'm going to address that error. So fetch tasks success. I can write just a little bit in here. There's no failing tests. Awesome. So what I'm going to say is const after fetch equals reducer initial state fetch tasks success action. I cannot read property type of undefined, which means it's not returning an actual object. So return empty object. Now it's okay. And I'm going to write what my actual expectation is. I expect after fetch.loading to be falsy. So now I'm going to have to actually start writing stuff. I'm going to go over to, well, a reducer here. I'm going to import /types. Yeah, so I'm going to create a types file. It just has these action types in it. Export const fetch tasks success equals, just kind of to make sure I wrote them the same way each time. So import types, and I'm going to return type fetch task success. I'm going to go to my reducer here. I'm going to make a case for fetch tasks success. And this is going to return basically, I want it to have loading state without loading. I know I could just set it to false. You don't want to do that. Return state loading false. And now there that passes. And the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to say I expect after fetch.tasks to equal tasks. All right, now it's saying expected value to equal, but it was empty. So I'm going to have to go to my actions and say that I'm going to pass tasks as part of the payload here. And then here I'm going to say that tasks is going to be action.tasks. And that passes. Now, I also have to write, and this is where it gets a little bit weird, because I have to perform an API call. Well, like I said, API was part of the middleware. The thing that often ends up happening with middleware is that, yeah, we're going to talk to an API and we're going to perform a new action. What we're going to do is we're going to bring in, we can create a middleware of our own that does this. It's pretty simple, but I kind of want to use what's called a thunk. So I'm going to bring in a middleware library. Now, there's a few really good middleware libraries. Redux Thunk is kind of the most basic. So Redux Thunk. It basically says, hey, if you pass in if instead of passing an object as an action, you pass in a function that can accept dispatch as a parameter, I'll feed you dispatch, and then you can do whatever the hell you want. So I'm going to go to my actions here, and I'm going to export function fetch tasks thunk. Now, normally this would take a dispatch, and then we'd be off to the races. There's one small thing, which is that I want to, if I were just running this on its own, I would, yeah, I would probably just run it like this. I would bring in the task service. I would get tasks here, and here I would say, I might even make this export async function. I would say um, const tasks equals await get tasks, and then dispatch fetch tasks success tasks. And this would be, assuming I spelled dispatch correctly, this would be kind of enough. I would be able to, basically it waits to get the tasks and dispatches this. I'm going to do at least this one with another test-driven development approach. So forget that I wrote that, but we're going to end up there. So I'm going to describe fetch tasks. Yeah, it, does an API call for tasks, then dispatches fetch task success. Now, one thing I'm going to note here is that I'm only doing kind of the happy path. Generally speaking, when I actually would write this, I would also write something to do what happens if it actually fails. I would handle that. But again, I'm going to leave that as an exercise for the reader just to kind of get through some of this. So I'm in a situation where I want to make sure that this actually calls something, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mock. Now, in this particular thing, my API is already a mock. So the main thing I have to do is const dispatch equals jest.fn. And now it's a function, and I can check to see how it's been called. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to just also want to create a mock for the get tasks, though. I want to make sure that I can pass a function from here. I can make sure this works. So I'm going to make one step here that just says fetch tasks func maker. And I'm going to create a promise. I'm basically going to make a function that I can use to mock a network call. So this will be promise.resolve, and I'm going to grab this tasks thing. In fact, I seem to be using it a lot, so I'm just going to make it available out here. Tasks. And I'm going to say const get tasks. I'm going to make another kind of mock. And this is just going to return the tasks promise. So basically, these are two little functions that I'm just checking to see have they been called, if they've been called, and then they're going to pretend to be the things I want them to be. So I'm going to say that const fetch tasks func equals fetch tasks func maker get tasks. And the reason I'm doing this, again, the entire point of it is just so I can mock out with my own get tasks. I think there's a way to do this where I replace a module. Have not gotten that to quite work with Jest, so I'm just kind of doing this longhand. All right, so I have that fetch task thunk, and I am going to, of course, I'm going to clear out the error that's already there, which is that fetch task thunk maker is not a function. Okay. All right, now it is. I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to try to call fetch tasks thunk with dispatch. Of course, can't do that. Fetch task thunk is not a function. So return function fetch. I'm going to make this, no, return function fetch tasks func. This is going to take in the dispatch, and this is the thunk. Um, okay, and then I'm going to go over here, my app test again, and I am going to um, expect dispatch, or actually, I'm not going to expect dispatch to have been called because it shouldn't have been called yet. All this does is just says like, "Hey, I'm starting," and then I am going to make this whole thing async await test, and I'm going to await the tasks promise. And I'm going to expect, well, I can expect get tasks to have been called. It hasn't been, right? So my first step is um, once tasks equals await get tasks. Okay. So I'm going to expect it to have been called. I'm going to wait for the task promise to be done, and then I'm going to say I expect dispatch to have been called with. So I'm going to expect it to have been called, and I'm going to expect that it has sent the fetch tasks success action with tasks. And there it is. I'm just going to say dispatch fetch tasks success. Okay, so now let's actually see this work for real. I'm going to um, export const fetch tasks. So I'm going to export a version of this where I can just say, hey, um, this is fetch tasks thunk maker with get tasks from task service. So it's just saying like, hey, we're making a version of that but instead of passing in a function, I already know what the function should probably be. It should probably be get tasks from the task service. Okay, so now in my index.js, where I instantiate the store, I'm also going to import tasks thunk Redux app actions. So now I have this thunk. I've totally tested it out. And I'm going to say store.dispatch fetch tasks thunk. And what I should see now, oh, I have to apply custom middleware for async actions. That's right. This brings me to the next thing I have to do, which is to bring in my middleware. So when I created this store here, I just created it with a reducer. I'm going to bring in the apply middleware function so it'll actually be able to apply that middleware. And I'm going to import Redux thunk from Redux thunk. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to bring in another middleware, um, Redux logger. This will basically copy to the so copy a log of all the Redux actions that have happened to the console, which I think is pretty handy. So import Redux logger, and then here, apply middleware, Redux logger, thunk. Okay, now I'm going to go back to my show browser, and in fact, I'm going to break this out into its own window. And we can see here action undefined. Well, that's that fetch state was tasks array 0 count 0. I got an action of type fetch task success with array 2. And the next state was, well, tasks loading false, adding count 0. Awesome. I think I may also, right now it said that action was undefined. So just for the sake of my own um, ability to debug, I am going to go ahead. I'm going to open up actions.js here, and I'm going to say, um, thunk, and I'm just going to say fetch tasks. Thunk.type. That'll just make it a little bit more clear when I look at it in the, there it is, fetch task thunk, and then fetch task success. The next thing I want to do is I want to, and I'm going to kind of leave off the TDD side of this just to sort of save time. Um, just save kind of presentation time, though I really love being able to do TDD with Redux. It makes life a lot simpler. I'm going to start making more of these. I'm going to make an add task bit. So let's start doing that. Add task pending, add task success. I'm going to add these types to types. Okay. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add task pending. I'm going to export. This is going to make a type turn add task pending. I'm going to go to the reducer. I'm going to say task thing. I'm going to this to my types. And the idea here is that I'm basically going to return state, but adding count is going to be state.adding count plus 1. And then I may as well start this add task success, turn state. Here we're going to decrease the adding count 1. And we're also going to say that tasks is going to be dot 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 state dot tasks, and the action dot new task. So we know that we have to make this work, we have to have a add task success action here as well. We're going to have a new task object, return type, add task success, and new task. Okay, so these are kind of installations. They represent atomic little changes. So I'm also going to include an thunk here. The export function add task thunk maker. So in order to make a thunk, I need to have a task name. And then, of course, async function add task thunk, and take in dispatch. I'm going to say here that add task thunk dot type equals add. All right, now I actually have to do the business. When this thing starts, the first thing it's going to do is dispatch, hey, I'm adding a task. So add task pending. And I'm going to await um, add task, or I should say const new task equals await add task name. So this is me doing an API call. And then I'm going to dispatch add task success. All right. So pretty simple. It says, okay, add task pending, waits for the new task to happen, then add task success. And then the reducer takes care of it all. Okay, now how do I actually wire this up? Well, you may have remembered that I had to map state to props and map dispatch to props. And I haven't really done anything with that yet. So map dispatch to props. We may also remember with the presenter that it was waiting to see an add task method, right? So I'm going to say, hey, there's add task. And what it's going to do is it's going to import from Redux app actions, add tasks maker. Um, the add task is going to take in a task name. So let's write that. There it is. When add task is called with a task name, it's going to dispatch add task thunk maker with task name. So it's going to dispatch this function, which is then going to get this thunk, which is going to get dispatched. So let's see how that works. I know I've done a lot of code without checking to see if it actually did anything. So let's take a look at this here. All right, so there's fetch task thunk, fetch task success. I'm going to finish Sudoku here. Now we see the add task thunk happen and the add task pending and then the add task success. So this seemed to have all worked the way it was supposed to. I dispatched the add task thunk sent the add task pending. We saw the adding count increment. And then with the add task success, it decremented. So let me add a few more. We can kind of see that go up and go back down. Okay, so now what's left here is the toggle task. We're going to go back to our actions. That's not what I wanted. So the thing that happens when we toggle is we set one thing to loading. We find that one task, we set it to loading true. So toggle task ending is going to take in a task ID, turn type, toggle task pending. We're going to go back to types, make sure we add. Although we can also, while we're at it, let's go back to our reducer. All right, now this is where it gets, if you may remember, we used, if you look at the to-do list container here, we used timer produce to do that whole tasks is produce tasks, yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to copy paste that in my reducer. um, or rather, I'm going to return state, and the task is going to be that stuff. I'm going to grab import produce from immer, and then this is going to be state.tasks, and that task ID I get from action.task ID. So I'm going to do this a different way. I'm going to go back to my actions, and I'm going to start building up that thunk. So export function toggle task thunk maker with the task ID. And this is, of course, I'm going to make an async function toggle task thunk, which takes in dispatch. Toggle task thunk dot type equals toggle task thunk, and I'm going to export return toggle task thunk. And what this is going to dispatch first is toggle task pending task ID. Okay. Right. Well, let me now go back to my container Redux. I'm going to toggle task thunk maker there. I'm going to ID dispatch. I'm going to add it to the props. Right. So now here we are. Buy bread. Now it has toggle task thunk, toggle task pending. Awesome, except of course that it's stuck at loading because we haven't actually done anything with this. So let's continue. But it's all wired up now, so that's the nice part, is that we can just kind of work on making it happen from this side. Got toggle task success. Actions. I have an action here. Export function toggle task success. I'm going to take a task ID and a toggled task. Return type. Toggle task. Bring in close that. Toggle task success, which apparently I spelled with one C. Yeah. And I'm going to tell this to dispatch, or const toggled task equals await toggle task ID. And I'm going to say that I'm going to dispatch toggle task success with task ID and toggled task. So this is basically saying, hey, I want you to send that we're going to be toggling something, and then I want you to toggle it, and then I want you to say that it happened. And right now, I think I closed a window I didn't want to, so nope, actually, I did not. There we go. Show browser. If you look at this here, apparently I don't know how to open up my own dev tools. If we do this now, it says toggle task thunk, toggle task pending, and then toggle task success. We just haven't made that clear yet. So Clear that. The only last thing to do here is just update my reducer. Bring in toggle task. Success. All right, and then we're going to return dot 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 state and tasks. Well, that's going to be again whatever we did in the container here, which is grab this, produce. And state dot tasks, action dot task ID, action dot toggle tasks. And yeah, if we look back at our browser, open this up in a new window, open up the DevTools, we can see that you have toggle task thunk, toggle task pending, and then toggle task success. So we have gone through all the states, and we're able to do, we can still make sure that this all works, right? Yeah, so we have now replicated what we did um, with a container pattern. And it's a little like using a bazooka to shoot a fly at this point, right? Like we had to really increase our vocabulary. We had to restructure things in new ways. What did we actually get? Well, this is kind of why I talk about Redux being kind of a bad choice at a small level. At a small level, Redux is just, it's like putting in framing for a birdhouse, right? It's a little bit overkill. But when you start having more complexity, Redux can be a real lifesaver. And what that complexity looks like is uh, either you have something where you have a lot of information coming in from a lot of different sources, and you want to manage that sanely. So if you have a highly volatile system, if you have one that has really complex rules that you just need to make sure that they absolutely work, this is a good case for a reducer. A reducer is really highly testable. It's really easy to check to see, like, well, if this happens and this happens, if this happens, this happens, and because it's the same input, the same output. Yeah, it's great for doing, kind of complex arbitrary rules. And then I think another aspect of it that isn't as important, thanks to React context, is that if you wanted to have a very distant component that was connected to your state management, you didn't have to do props drilling. But now with the context, you don't need that as much anyway. Yeah, and then, but again, to me, one of the great parts about it is test-driven development. I can simulate, considering it's just old state plus action equals new state. I can kind of simulate the process of getting to a really distant state, and then by just saying, like, well, here, the current state is this, and then what happens next, and it doesn't have to wait for me to like set up a bunch of steps. So I really kind of appreciate that about Redux. And also, I really like using Redux outside of React as well. Whenever I do any like decently complicated, actually even really not that complicated, whenever I do a socket app, I really like using Redux. And yeah, and that's a good example of like getting a bunch of input in from a bunch of different places. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that was an informative view of how one could make an app with Redux. I think what I might do in a future video series is also go through the different Redux middleware libraries doing the same app over and over again with those middleware libraries, because combining a bunch of actions, there's a few ways to do it. In my next video, I am going to use a new library called RX React that uses the reactive extensions library and kind of does this in a new, really cool reactive way. So thank you so much for watching. It sounds super cheesy, but please like and subscribe, share with your friends. Be sure to click the bell, because apparently that's how you get a notification that more has happened. But thank you very much.